Greetings, peoples of the internet. I'm here today making this video because of a thread on an internet forum called sporttouring.net. A while ago someone posted about an unfortunate incident that somebody they knew had in a decreasing radius right hand corner. And, well, you know how it goes. When it came down to it, the point of contention was, what is the correct line to take into and through a right hand corner on the street in America? Fairly specific, huh? Unfortunately, that is exactly the same question as what is the correct line to take on approach and through a left-hand corner in Great Britain, because we ride on the opposite side of the road. So this video will be aimed at people turning left in Great Britain. Now, if you live elsewhere in the world, don't worry, you just need a mirror or to be able to swap left for right in your head. Okay, so on the two sides of this argument we have Motorcycle Roadcraft, the seminal advanced riding manual in the United Kingdom, basis of all emergency services riding and driving techniques, and used as the basis of pretty much every advanced riding syllabus anywhere in the country, and indeed in many other parts of the world. And ranged against it, we have this publication, written by another Brit, funnily enough, Smooth Pride Riding the Pridmore Way by multiple AMA champion Reg Pridmore. So let's start off by looking at a couple of diagrams, one from each of the two source books. Motorcycle Roadcraft tells us that there are three priorities when tackling a left-hand bend: safety, stability and view, in that order. Broadly, safety is don't run into the oncoming traffic. Stability is don't ride through a patch of gravel or diesel. And then the view is position yourself to see as far as possible. And the reason it's done in that order is clearly you don't put yourself in danger of being hit by oncoming traffic in order to see further. Neither do you ride through a patch of gravel just to get an extra few meters of view. But in practice, quite a lot of the time, the majority of the time, you're positioning for the view. Your view is not compromised because you have to move for safety or stability. So Motorcycle Roadcraft is very, very big on the vision line. Switching to Reg Pridmore's thoughts on turning left, or because he's in America turning right, the contrast couldn't be more stark. He warns against the vision line specifically and explicitly because, he says, it's dangerous. It takes you into conflict with oncoming traffic. His view is that you should tuck into the hedge at the apex of the corner. It's not clear from his description how you would identify the apex of a corner that you don't know the profile of, but he definitely believes that if you're in the hedge, you're further from oncoming traffic and therefore you are by definition safer. So let's examine that the Reg Pridmore line in more detail. First thing I want to talk about is this concept of apexing. Now on a racetrack, the fastest line through any given corner is the straightest line, and the straightest line is one where you start at the widest extent of the track, you clip the inside of the track at some point in the corner, and then you drift out to the outside of the track, making the maximum use of the available space to straighten out the corner as far as possible before proceeding up the next straight. And that classic out in out racetrack line has been the way everyone from motorcyclists to bicycle racers to car racers goes round a corner on a racetrack. But on a racetrack, all the corners are of a known profile, and it's the same profile this lap as it was last lap. So and it doesn't matter that the corner is blind, because there's a marshal's post and someone with a flag to tell you if there's something just out of sight round the corner, and you're racing, so you're going as fast as you can. So that's your objective, fastest line through the corner. But even on a racetrack, particularly on a motorcycle, there isn't an apex for a corner. The apex is where you choose to hit the inside of the corner, or clip the inside of the corner, because different motorcycles, lighter motorcycles, heavier motorcycles, different tyre compounds, different riding styles, result in different riders apexing in different places. A lighter bike might take more sweeping lines, whereas on a heavier, faster, more powerful bike you might square off the corner, i.e. brake deeper, turn in later and clip a later apex. And these variations are all on corners where you actually know the shape of the bend. In this example, 3 different riders on 3 different lines apex this right hand corner in 3 completely different places. Of course, when you're riding on the street, you often don't know whether you're entering a gentle kink or a tight hairpin, and if those were corners on a racetrack, then each would be entered and apexed at completely different points. The rest of us have a far simpler, starker question to answer. When we're approaching a blind left-hander in the UK, should we be taking the Reg Pridmore / hedge trimmer line, or the motorcycle Roadcraft / vision line? And to examine those 2 options in more detail, I'm going to be going out into the countryside with a motorcycle and a big stack of cones and some measuring equipment, and then I'm going to find a corner and I'm going to study the crap out of it. But before I do that, there is a piece of terminology I want to cover. It's variously called the arrowhead, the vanishing point. By a very famous advanced instructor called Mike Waite, it was called the visual point, and it is now officially called the limit point, which is short for the limit point of observation. And it is simply this point here, the point where the 2 hedges ahead meet. Might also be the point where a blind crest obstructs your vision. It's basically as far ahead as you can see, and typically in a corner it's the point where the near side hedge and the offside hedge meet. And as we shall discover when we come to the corner that I've chosen to study, we really need to be able to stop before we get there, because if we can't, then we're overriding our sightlines. The corner I've chosen for my in-depth investigation is on the main back road from the small town of Llandilo to the county town of Carmarthen, and it's a corner on Capel-Dewi Road, which, as I say, is the main back road after the main road from Llandilo to Carmarthen. And I'm going to be standing in the middle of a blind corner with a parked motorcycle playing with measuring equipment and cones for a couple of days. And the only reason I'm doing that, and as you can see, this is my corner. The only reason I'm able to do that is because if I drop street view in, there you go, that's the corner we're going to be looking at. And the only reason I can get away with standing in the middle of that corner for a couple of days is because about 6 months ago, and about a mile up the road from here, what you'll see in a second is some roadworks or some lights that have been there because the council were worried that something might happen to this stretch of road. And as I say, about 6 months ago, what did happen to this stretch of road was it all fell down there into the river. And so if you'd been overriding your sight lines that night, you'd have ended up down there in the river, and that would have spoilt your day. So the road is closed, as you can see, and that means we get a corner to play with pretty much undisturbed. So let's take a quick spin through our chosen corner. Initially on the motorcycle Roadcraft line, so you're on approach, we're taking position out by the white line. There are no road surface issues, there's no oncoming traffic, there's nothing that would stop us being out there, and we can see through the corner. And there we go, following the centre line. And now let's look at a run through the same corner on the Reg Pridmore line. See, we're tucked into the left, we can't see very far, but so we're almost in the hedge, and there we go, and on the exit of the corner. So let's get down to some measuring. For that I need the patented collapsible measuring wheel, which measures in meters. So here I am walking on the I'm walking backwards actually, but that's just to get myself into position. I'm walking on the motorcycle Roadcraft line, and I'm going to, for the purposes of this exercise, there's a tree over there and it's casting a shadow across the road, and there's a tarmac patch there where they've put a pipe in, and I'm going to say the point where I see the tarmac and the tarmac patch and the shadow cross, the left hand edge of that, that's going to be my marker. So the measuring wheel is down on the Pridmore line, and I'm going to walk around until I can see that shadow, which we will see, for the sake of argument, it's either a stationary obstruction or the front wheel of something nasty. Right, there you go, and I don't know if you can see that on this video, but I am now looking at that, and it says here 15.5 meters to get the same view. Yep, 1550. Okay, so that's from being out here near the white line to being here almost in the gutter. So the Reg Pridmore line, on the Reg Pridmore line, if that shadow was actually a fallen tree or a big hole in the ground or something laid in the road, I would see it about 1¼ seconds later at 30 miles an hour. Okay, so let me zero this now and let's just see how far we are from it here. We've already got 15.5, so that's our point, and we're actually 63.5 metres. So the highway code quotes example stopping distances from different speeds. It's a very, very high level figure. It's related to braking tests that were done in the dry in the 1970s, I think. So of course they're pretty conservative with a small c if you're stopping on a decent surface in a straight line when you're really on your game on a modern motorcycle where everything is perfect. But in the real world, where roads are greasy and maybe you aren't entirely on your game and your tyres are cold, they're a pretty good real world allowance. And as you can see, they incorporate a thinking distance, which is basically reaction time, and that's consistent over the speeds, and a stopping distance which varies pretty much logarithmically from low speeds, doesn't increase linearly. And you'll see that the stopping distance from 60 miles an hour is about 73 metres, 240 odd feet, whereas at 50 miles an hour it is 53 metres all in, and that's 175 feet. So if you're on the motorcycle Roadcraft line, then you're absolutely fine at 60 miles an hour. If you're on the Pridmore line, then you better not be doing 60, because you'll end up wearing whatever it is that is ahead of you. In our test corner, a lateral movement of 1.5 metres allowed us to see 27 metres further down the road. That's a gearing of roughly 20 to 1 metre laterally for 20 metres further down the road. However, in more acute corners, that gearing is going to be lower. Worst case, it can be as low as 1 to 1. You end up having to move at least as far laterally to see the same distance further forward. And at that point, there isn't really no safety benefit from positioning for the view at all. On the other hand, in gentler kinks, the gearing can be 1, 2, 3, 400 to 1. So much further can you see for a relatively small lateral movement. So it's a no-brainer. Consider this tight left-hander, where the hedge is set back from the road so you can see through the corner, and let's make it blind, and notice the white lines, how scuffed they are. That tells me that vehicles coming the other way regularly cross the centre line, cut this corner. So with this little visibility, you can see where the limit point is, and evidence of vehicles crossing the line, applying my 3 priorities from motorcycle Roadcraft: safety, stability and view, I'm going to say that for safety I'm going to tuck right in and slow right down, because even being out on the other side of the road wouldn't give me very much in the way of extra view, but it does put me at a significant risk of getting a lorry in my face. So I think we've reasonably established the benefits of the Vision stroke motorcycle Roadcraft line when we have the road to ourselves, but that's not the reason that Pridmore advises against it. He is concerned about the risk of meeting oncoming traffic, and so in order to study that one in more detail, I'm going to have to go back to my corner, and I'm going to have to enlist some help in the form of my glamorous assistant, tiger mounted Maria, who will be performing measurements and taking observations for me whilst I hold a camera and talk inanely at you. Cones. Here I'm being assisted by my glamorous assistant Maria, who has taken herself down the road and has marked out with cones the point at which you can first see each of these two motorcycles, which are on respectively the Reg Pridmore line and the motorcycle Roadcraft line. So the trophy is on the Reg Pridmore line and the Tiger is on the motorcycle Roadcraft line. And this is the point that Maria has marked out, as you can see down there, for exactly how far apart those two are. And I'm going to grab the measuring wheel and I'm going to go down and join her now, and we're going to measure those 2 points out. We've now come up the other end of our run, and my glamorous assistant Maria is now using the measuring wheel to measure the distance between the two cones. And if I stand up by this cone, looking back up the road, I can just see her Tiger from here. I can't see my trophy at all. Okay, and the measuring wheel says 27 metres. 27 metres. Okay, so as Maria has measured 27 metres, a hell of a long way, and as I come along here, I'm going to move out to the middle of my lane, but I still cannot see. Right, just now I can glimpse the trophy, but I can't see the whole bike yet. So yes, now I can see the trophy properly in the middle of the lane. And if I was over here on the centre line, let's say I was cutting the corner, which is what we're concerned about, if I was cutting the corner on a motorcycle, I can't see that at all. That's 27 metres, and at 60 miles an hour, that's 1 second. You can do a lot in a second. If I was only doing 30 miles an hour, that would be 2 seconds. Now, someone will say, well, if you're doing 60 and the trophy or the Tiger are doing 60 coming the other way, that's 120 miles an hour. That's half a second, not a second. But of course it's half a second each. We both get half a second. The person coming this way gets half a second, and the person coming the other way gets half a second as well. So that's a second all the same. And that is the difference between life and death. My glamorous assistant is still measuring, and they're going to measure the distance back to the bikes, because that has a lot to do with the time and space that you have to make a decision and to avoid. So we know already that it's 27 metres sooner that you see the bike coming the other way. So really, what is a lateral movement of no more than a metre possibly between those two bikes up there. And at 60 miles an hour, that's quite a long time. So quite a long way, but not very much positioning. there's 115 metres from the far cone. So that's almost 25% further that you can see a bike out here on the motorcycle Roadcraft line compared with a bike over here on the Reg Pridmore line. So what can you do with the second? Well, this simulated emergency avoidance manoeuvre in our corner, from initiation to completion, took just under a second. And a 1200 trophy is not exactly nimble. So this is quite a simple experiment. It's a pain in the neck to set something like this up, but it is so illuminating. It's only when you literally go and stand down the road and look back and get a measuring wheel out and measure how much more vision you have and how more easily you can be seen there with a movement laterally of, we've just measured between these two bikes, and it's 1.5 metres between the front wheels of these two motorcycles, literally for being 1.5 metres further out on this left-hander, and in America that would be a right-hander, everything is just in reverse, we get an extra second at 60 miles an hour. So yeah, that's a lifetime. And being able to see 25% further down the road on this particular corner. Obviously that works out differently on tighter corners, you won't see as far, and on more open corners you'll see a lot further. But I think for this corner, which I reckon is about a 60 mile an hour corner if you use the highway code stopping distances, which is what I was talking about earlier, this corner, there's only one place you want to be, and it's right out there on the white line, and you don't want to be over here at all. But of course, stationary and oncoming hazards aren't the only ones that we need to be worried about. Particularly if we're on the Pridmore line, we need to be worrying about hazards that are tucked into the hedge. Like cyclists, or pedestrians, or escaped livestock, or horse riders, or broken down motorcyclists. So now Maria has done exactly the same thing, and what we're imagining here is that we're a pedestrian or a horse or a broken down vehicle in the verge, and we wanted to know, if I was a motorcyclist coming the other way, when would I see this person? How far away would they have to be? How long would I have to see them? So just from here you can see it's behind, there you go, it's behind Maria, but that is her Tiger, and if you were standing where this cone is, this is the point where the rider of that bike would see me standing. They would see me standing here, and the other cone just up there would be where the pedestrian would have to be standing before the trophy rider would see him. So Maria is now going to measure between these 2 points, and I don't expect it'll be 27 metres this time, but all the distances are compressed. Okay, and the meter says 17 metres, which is a long way, but now what we're going to do is we're going to compare the entire distance back to the two bikes. So Maria's going to measure that now. And you look at this and you think, well, you know, from this cone here back to the trophy, if the trophy's tanking on a bit, and I think we worked out yesterday that on that line, to be able to stop,
the trophy can't be exceeding 50 miles an hour, and that is an emergency stop. You don't have an awful lot of time to make any decisions if you're on that line. So 17 metres is about 1.5 seconds, I reckon. 1.5 seconds at 30 miles an hour, 3/4 of a second at 60 miles an hour, so call it a second at 50, which again is the safe speed of that speed on this line, and that's out of a total of 71 metres. So that's again about 25% of the distance. So you get 25% more viewing range for being 1.5 metres wider. Obviously, on a wider road, this is quite a narrow back road. On a wider road, this makes a hell of a lot more difference. And the other thing that makes a difference, of course, is if the verges, these are hedges that are set very tightly to the road. So if you've got wider verges and a wider road, then for the same profile of corner, you get to see an awful lot further for being out towards the centre line. That's also why, if you watch British emergency service riders, police, paramedics and the like, they might even be out here because they can see even further from out here on the wrong side of the road. So this is the view from the motorcycle on the Reg Pridmore line on my trophy, and as you can see, here's my pedestrian coming around the corner. That's really not very far away. Now imagine, I don't know, imagine that's a Great Dane lolloping up the road towards us at speed. I'm really not liking this. I don't want to be here. That is so close. I've got so little time to react. All I've got to be doing is be distracted by something or a bit of sun glare, and I'm going to be into a world of hurt, because the next thing, you know, whilst I'm fiddling with my visor, and whoosh, I've got a pedestrian right in front of me, and I'm going to have to do something drastic to try and avoid them. I'm not going to be able to stop. So no, this is so not a good idea. Really, it's not.
Game over.
Not only do you have less time and space to perform a quote swerve out unquote manoeuvre as opposed to a swerve in, but you also are swerving out into something of the unknown, because being tucked into the hedge you haven't had the opportunity to fully assess what might be coming the other way, and so you might end up swerving around something in the hedge straight into the face of an oncoming car. It's also a two-step manoeuvre. You have to swerve out, you have to stop yourself crossing the centre line, and you have to swerve back the other way potentially, or at least back onto the straight line.
Okay, now I'm sitting on Maria's Tiger, and again, I might even be closer to the white line here, but even from here, look how much further I get, how much more warning I get of the fact that there's an obstruction on the inside line. But also, look how little it matters. If I'm aiming to follow the centre line, to be out wide, the only time I'm going to duck into to the left there is if there's a car coming the other way that's across my side of the road, or vehicles that are up against the white line, and I might want to give them some clearance. But so I need to know that Maria is, or the pedestrian is coming this way, because I'll need to know not to go too far to the left. But really, normally, if I'm on this line, that's not a threat to me. If that could be a broken down car, that could be, like I said, livestock or wildlife, and it's not a threat to me. I just have time to slow down on my own line. I'm not going to interact with that wildlife or that pedestrian. So the only time that becomes an issue for me is if I need to move left to avoid an obstruction on the right. And to be honest, the earlier I see the pedestrian, and as you can see I have as much welding as I'm ever going to get being out here, the earlier I see that pedestrian, in that case, the better, because it gives me a chance to compute a course that takes me between, let's say, the encroaching oncoming vehicle and the pedestrian. So, again, I'm left thinking, why would you not want to be over here? Why would you want to be on the left, or in America, on the right?
And finally, remember the limit point? We mentioned it at the start of this video. It turns out the limit point has a really useful property that means that we're going to want to keep it as far away from us as we possibly can in corners. It can be used to help us read the road. Now, given this thread arose because of an incident in a decreasing radius corner, if you keep an eye on the limit point, you will notice that as the corner opens out, the limit point moves away from you, which means that you know when a corner is unwinding before other people who aren't keeping an eye on the limit point, so you can get on the gas earlier. Conversely though, if the limit point starts moving towards you mid-corner, that tells you that the corner is tightening up, and that's the earliest warning you're going to get of that. And it can turn decreasing radius corners into a total no drama situation. If you're travelling at a speed where you can stop in a distance you can see to be clear on your own side of the road, and the limit point starts moving towards you, and your position so the limit point is a good way away from you, then dealing with that decreasing radius corner is as simple as just rolling off the throttle slightly, because you haven't got to lose very much speed, you haven't got to decelerate at a great rate. If on the other hand you are reading the limit point, but the limit point is really close to you, because you're on the Reg Pridmore line around a long corner, then you perhaps have to take more drastic action. You have to shock the throttle more, maybe you have to brake, and that's not clearly not as desirable a way of dealing with the problem. But reading the limit point is a very, very useful technique, because very often the various other features of a corner can tend to deceive you. So the first you realise that a corner is the radius of a corner is decreasing is when you start running out of road, and then you have no option but to just lean the bike over harder and stay relaxed, look through the corner, maintain a positive throttle and just ride it out. And whilst that is the right thing to do, if you find yourself in that situation, it's still a little bit of a gamble. Whereas if you can see the problem before you get to it, then your sphincter will pucker much less often in corners than it otherwise would. And now, by kind permission of Mr. Jack Sanderson, let's see what happens when it does all go wrong. Now, miraculously, Mr. Sanderson was not seriously injured in this incident, as you will shortly see. Sadly, his Kawasaki ZX6R will never play the piano again. A quick trip to Google Earth confirms the impression from the video that this is a decreasing radius corner linking two short straights. And a point of geographical information for overseas viewers, this is a corner on the very well-known Cat and Fiddle Road, which is, for American listeners, it's kind of a UK equivalent of the Dragon. People come from far and wide to ride this road. And as you can see, it's a blind decreasing radius left-hand corner, when you approach from the Buxton end of the road. For contrast, here is YouTube vlogger Crust600 following another rider through the same corner back in spring 2012. There's no denying the significant role that speed and inappropriate speed played in the causation of this incident. Mr. Sanderson was still doing 50 miles an hour when he left the road. But actually, speed alone does not explain this accident, and in fact, if all else had been equal, the speed alone would have not caused an accident at all. So we join Mr. Sanderson at the start of what is going to be a slow motion side-by-side run through of this corner, and it's worth noting that it is my understanding that this video run through was for both riders the first time they had ever seen this corner. Immediately we see Mr. Sanderson has made an assumption about the profile of this corner, and he thinks he's looking at a kink. The arrangement of the dry stone wall is a little deceptive in the topography, and he's diving for an early apex right here, and he's expecting this corner to unwind, and he's heading hard towards a classic Reg Pridmore style apex. Now Mr. Sanderson is top left and Crust600 is bottom right as they both head into this corner for the first ever time. Now there's a great deal of time dilation being used to make these two videos sync as well as they do. Crust600, for example, bottom right, had went into the corner at about 42-43 miles an hour and was clearly reading the limit point and decelerating, exiting the corner at about 30 miles an hour as it tightened. Mr. Sanderson was going in rather more sportily and was very much overriding his sight lines. And in fact at this point here he's still on a neutral throttle. He hasn't started to brake because he hasn't realised that the corner is tightening yet. It's also noticeable if you look at the line that Crust600 is following. He's not taken a more extreme line which would have given him a better view, and the reason for that is obvious if you look at the nature of the road and the nature of the corner. Double white lines, and the outer of the two lines is very obviously worn and scuffed, so clearly large vehicles have been encroaching onto that line. Also, it's a very, very popular biking road, and there are an awful lot of people who ride it less than entirely sanely. So you do find an awful lot of MotoGP wannabes coming round those corners absolutely on the limit with their heads over this side of the road. So it's only prudent to apply your three principles of safety, stability and view, and say, okay, I want as good a view as possible, but not at the expense of coming into conflict with oncoming vehicles. So not quite across the other side or right up to the right line, but just a little bit off, just a little bit inside, and that seems like a very sensible choice of line for this corner. Going back to Mr. Sanderson, first of all, if you look at what he can see, it's quite easy to understand why he isn't aware yet that this corner is tightening. Even if he was reading the limit point, he couldn't really tell from where he is that it was moving towards him, because everything is very flat. By contrast, just that 2/3 of a lane further out that Crust600 is riding, and voila, there you go. You can see further, you can see that the corner is tightening already, and they're both in pretty much the same place in those in these two clips, as I say, because I've manipulated the timings to put them in the same place. The other thing looking at Mr. Sanderson's clip is the Cat and Fiddle, as well as being notorious for motorcycles and slow moving heavy goods vehicles, is also very popular with cyclists who use it as a a place to try and improve their Strava rankings, which means you get a lot of very purple-faced middle-aged people in lycra cycling at 5 miles an hour up hills, and to be honest, the chance of finding a cyclist round one of these blind corners is really quite high. And suffice it to say that if Mr. Sanderson came across a cyclist halfway around the corner that he's going around there, on the line he's on there would be deaths. So as Cross 600 continues serenely through the corner with pretty much no drama at all, the penny has started to drop for Mr. Sanderson that actually this corner is tightening and this is all starting to go a bit wrong, and he's now trying to shed speed as quickly as he can. You can see the bike starting to run wide on the brakes, but he's pulling it tight, he's trying to scrub off speed, and then bosh, just at that vital moment, as he's shedding speed, a car catches his eye. Now there are a couple of problems with this line he's on beyond the ones that we've discussed at length in this video. One of them is that if you want to look through the corner, which is the classic piece of cornering advice, and not for any bad reason, because it is absolutely solid gold advice, look through the corner. And of course he can't look through the corner because the corner is tightening, and if he's going to look through the corner he has to look in a direction where all he can see is dry stone wall whizzing past his nose at about 60 miles an hour as he tries to shed speed rapidly. So he can't look through the corner. The best he can do is look as far ahead as he can see, and all too close to him, suddenly he sees a car coming the other way, right in the direction he's currently pointing. Now, I mean, we all know about target fixation, and for those of us who don't, target fixation is a phenomenon left over from our misspent past as a species in the jungle. If you were out picking apples or other fruit, and suddenly out of the corner of your eye you caught sight of a saber-toothed tiger eyeing you up, suddenly your head would snap round and you would be staring at the saber-toothed tiger and you would not be taking your eyes off it. And that was pretty much a very useful instinct, because who the hell wants to ignore a saber-toothed tiger if it's about to eat you? And the point was that this was hardwired, because it was such an ingrained response. It would basically override everything else, and you would be looking at the threat that your subconscious had identified, and then you'd be staring at it. Now this worked great with saber-toothed tigers. You could always say, no, I'm going to ignore you today, I'm going to carry on picking these apples, and I'm going to trust you not to eat me. And that probably wasn't a very good move. But now, of course, you're on a motorcycle, and your brain is hardwired to go and stare at the saber-toothed tiger, or in this case the oncoming car, the moment it jumps into its eye line. And if you don't twig this is what's going on, then you will continue to stare at it because it feels very uncomfortable tearing your eyes away. And because very often a motorcycle goes exactly where you're looking, if you have an object that is scaring you that you are staring at, then it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out what happens next, which is that you end up hitting the only thing for 20 miles around that you do not want to hit. So suddenly, from braking and slowing down and having scrubbed off, actually by this point, an awful lot of speed, by the time he crosses the centre line, Mr. Sanderson has basically lost all the speed he needs to lose, and he will make the corner absolutely fine. But unfortunately, because of where he is on the road, which is to say having entered that corner on a very tight line, he found himself unaware until too late that the corner was tightening. He'd restricted his vision so that he was unable to see the car until very late, and because he was on a very tight line, his eye was drawn to the oncoming traffic in a way that encouraged him to fixate on it, which in turn led to him momentarily fixating, standing the bike up, going in a straight line, and putting himself in a position where he was unable to regain his own side of the road, and he had to choose between hitting the car and riding off the road. So I'm going to say that line selection was at least as big a factor as speed in the causation of this incident, and I hope Mr. Sanderson will always be this lucky. So what's going on here then? Why is Reg Pridmore, multiple AMA champion and a man who can control a motorcycle better in his sleep than I can when I'm awake, I'm sure, so convinced that the vision line is dangerous? Well, this is only my theory, but I think it relates to the other thing that Reg Pridmore is famous for, which is his theory about body steering. Now, clearly, as anyone who has experienced the Keith Coe No BS bike will know, body steering as such, steering by shifting your body weight, doesn't actually make a motorcycle turn. But what it can do is it can accidentally countersteer the motorcycle, or incidentally countersteer the motorcycle, and cause you to change direction. And Reg Pridmore's big thing is smoothness, and I think he feels that moving your entire body from side to side enables you to change direction more smoothly, but probably not quickly, which means that you probably can't do this if you don't believe in countersteering but do believe in body steering. And if you can't do that, then arguably the vision line is dangerous, because you can't get out of the way of anything quickly. You have to plan your changes in direction in advance. So it could be as simple as that. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So make your own minds up. But I will say this: Motorcycle Roadcraft is now available on both Amazon.com and Amazon.co.uk for the Amazon Kindle, or in Kindle format. Thank you very much. I now return you to your regularly scheduled argument on sporttouring.net. Anybody who wants to see an hour-long video on how to turn right in the UK or left in America should pay attention to the forthcoming Kickstarter, where I'm looking for at least $2.5 million before I get on with that. Thank you very much indeed, and good night.